Arganissima, New York. Your exotic skin, hair, and beauty source, and your one-stop shop for all your natural and organic skin and hair care, featuring authentic organic Moroccan oil and prickly pear seed oil and much more. Bringing you only the best, straight from the source and proudly produced in the USA. So what are you waiting for? Shop today at www.arganissima.com. Arganissima, New York. Your beauty is our duty.
Folks, welcome back to the Sales World channel, iHealth Radio, with your host, Hurricane H. New day, new show, new topic. We're in the sales world, so we're talking careers, career development, business, leadership. That's the channel for this particular purpose. And with me, I have someone who's actually going to guide us through some of these things. So, it is important. We live in an environment where maybe finances and world of economics can be difficult. Businesses can be tough. Finding a career path that is appropriate can be a difficult thing. Many people have decided to change their paths, post-pandemic, and a lot of things have happened since the last couple of years. And again, my guest today is going to change a little bit of our perspective with her background and her work that she does in terms of career path and career tuning, career assistance, and things like that, career development. So without any further ado, I have with me Fatemah, Mirza, and she's going to talk to us about a whole bunch of stuff. So first things first, Fatemah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And it is, like I had said earlier, I enjoy this discussion because I've actually had a few shows about, career developments and specifically in my world. But again, I mean, there's so many things we can talk about in terms of assistance, guidance, and what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth. But we can also talk about the I guess just the environment we live in today and how things improve. But also, I want to make sure that we cover your angle, your business type, and what you do to help people that way. So before we get into that, just if you don't mind, introduce Fatemah to us and her path and what got you into this particular part of the business.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Fatemah Mirza, and I help ambitious professionals basically find better paying and more fulfilling jobs. Sometimes that means making a shift. Sometimes it means having honest conversations with your boss about what you need. So that's what I help people do. And I really love working with sales professionals. Most recently, I have seen a lot of sales professionals kind of moving around, especially from like one sector to the other, like from real estate to software or vice versa. So those transitions are always interesting and they're kind of tricky. It seems like it would be logical to make such a transition, but it can be tricky. Yeah, for sure.
Well, again, I am in sales. I've been in sales all my life. I mean, it depends on how you look at it, but I still core health. I mean, it's really sales for me.
Right.
And we do have a saying, I guess, if once you're in sales, you're always in sales. You can adjust, to the products or the offerings and from industry to other. As long as you have the right skills, you can do that. But you're right, it's not easy to just convert from one industry to the other overnight because you have to adapt and learn the intricate stuff of each industry specifically. Once you're good at one, doesn't mean you're going to be good at that. But if you have what it takes central, as your base foundation, I think that can help. But now you basically, do you help people specifically in terms of like, let's say you do consulting with, if I wanted to shift, I'll come to you and then you'll help us, get through the process and maybe give us guidance. So if you don't mind, guide us through that process, as an, with an potential example.
Sure. So let's say you are in sales and you're transitioning from real estate to software sales, right? This is a transition that I've seen come up quite a lot in the past, in 2022 at least. And probably going to see that in 2023 and beyond. So what's happening to you is like software sales, like the people that are hiring, they have a very specific way they like to think about themselves. I feel like when you make above a certain amount of pay, that value becomes who you are. Like it becomes very tied to who you are. So their egos and their sense of self is really tied into the work that they do. So whenever they see an outsider, oh, this guy's coming in from real estate, or this guy's coming in from like some other field, their guard goes up. They're like, what gives you, the audacity basically to come in and interview here? So it's a very specific way you have to kind of talk to these people. There's a lot of kind of messaging and branding that you have to get just right, starting from the resume. So like the first thing we do is redo your resume, make sure that there's not like too much emphasis on real estate. Like if you're just saying like closed, like beachfront property was worth $3 million, blah, blah, blah. Like immediately my guard would go up if I was in software, and I would say, all right, Hisham's he's just a real estate guy. Yeah, he's not smart enough. He's not technical enough. That's rude. That's really messed up. But this is the honest and unfortunate reality of how people are perceived when you're just a piece of paper, when it's easy to kind of break you apart and compare you. So that's one thing. And then like in your interview, obviously you cannot be like really kind of highlighting your real estate experience. You can definitely talk about it because it would be disingenuous not to. But kind of tying it into software is really important. So like things like, even to the question, tell me about yourself, you can say something like, I did get my start in the real estate world, but I've always been very interested in the world of software sales. We did some implementations at my real estate firm. We rolled out some software. It was so interesting. I love understanding, businesses' needs and understanding what the conflicting stakeholder criteria might be and figuring out how to make everyone happy. These are very like software sales headaches that you're supposed to come in and solve. So kind of speaking that language is really important in the interview process. And then, negotiating your salary, you're going to be seen as somebody who like is kind of entering that world. So they're probably not going to they're going to use that to kind of undermine your ability to ask for more. But there are ways around that depending on your situation. Maybe you have taken courses, or maybe you do have a lot of software experience. It's just not really apparent because your job titles all say real estate, real estate, real estate. So figuring out how to best present yourself in those situations and asking for more is also, it's also tricky, but it's very doable. I think transitions are becoming so common now, not even like since the pandemic, but since the Great Recession of 2008. It's become very, very common for people to move around as industries crash and go back up. So people see gaps in 2008 and in 2020, and they're okay. Like we understand, we all have that shared trauma, right? So that's basically what we would do. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I know there's a lot in there that you covered, and so I want to just dissect it and unpack it and just kind of break it down a little bit. So, well, first things first. I know you specifically mentioned the example of the real estate into software sales, and there are different worlds. And you're right. I mean, if you're in the software, you probably want someone that has that kind of experience. By the way, that's pretty standard in all industries. You want someone that's got the experience. I mean, I want to go back to even the basics. I mean, right now you come out of college and you want to seek a job. The first thing is like, well, how many years of experience? Well, none. I mean, unless you do some internships and stuff, you really started with none. And it becomes very difficult. Many people actually wind up doing something different because they don't have the experience in whatever they majored in.
Exactly.
So it starts already bad from the college days, and then you just, you have to wing it and work something out to get into. Once you get into some sort of a niche or, industry, and you get your footings, I think that helps. But that's one challenge. But you talked about real estate. Real estate sales is pretty, large, right? And it's a different personality. It's a different approach. And whether it's commercial, residential, there are just slight differences. But at the end of the day, believe it or not, I sold real estate. I taught real estate in New York for many years. And a lot of sales agents, actually, we used to do the courses in New York to get licensed. And we did the sales training as well. And so the training for real estate agents is a little different, and brokers. And it's just about, the prospecting, find the listings, blah, 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 how to present, the properties and how to be different from others. But that concept applies to almost all industries. Now, my core sales is in the insurance world, and more specifically in health insurance. And so just being in those two elements of sales is one thing. I have not actually dabbled in sales, like software, although I was approached to actually do some of it. And it could be done because I looked into it. And you're right. It's like, how do you change your mindset from one thing and not always relate to your existing experience or your background, and start to almost readjust to whatever that language is, because you have to switch the language discussion, and not everybody can do that transition, so it needs some coaching and things. And I love what you do, and I guess CareerTuners, I mean, it's just perfect. It's like you are tuning them to actually switch and do things. And you said that 2008 recession, a lot of industries crashed, and financial industries was big. A lot of people moved from there, from even like some of the financial pieces into, again, in the insurance world, that was a very common insurance. As a matter of fact, we've hired a lot of people that had something because they had the licensing. It was easy. And frankly, even me personally, I do recruit a lot of people in my jobs. And especially salespeople, because I'm head of sales. So we're always interviewing sales, and you never stop. And, I've had, again, luckily in my industry, we accept everybody. I mean, if you have sales experience, that's what we care about. We don't care so much about the industry. Obviously, preferable to have a background in what we do, like let's say in our world, Medicare, managed care, managed care in general, insurance sales, not commercial. We've hired people from any sales, whether telecom, car salespeople, software salespeople, medical sales, even pharma sales, reps we've recruited. And by the way, I had been offered to work at Merck's, a long time ago, for pharmaceutical stuff. So again, they're all different angles and different backgrounds, and you have to learn those industries specifically to be able to pitch. And the clientele may vary, because software, you're looking at companies and IS, leadership or CI, chief information officers, that kind of thing. Those are the ones you kind of operate with, or operations. In real estate, you're talking to really the buyers and the people that are, or the business owners that actually gonna start a location. So it changes dynamics, but the idea is not everybody knows how to approach it. And I love what you do, because it can help people kind of shift. Now, you said something about the resume, and I think that's a big question, and we can spend a minute about it. So I have a question about it, and then I'll interject. Is it true that the decisions I made in the first, chapter of your resume, the first, 2 sentences of your resume, with intro to your resume, and how much time does someone really take to evaluate your resume in reality, in the business of HR?
Right. It depends on what stage of the reading process your resume is in. It's not like, okay, it's just one kind of person reading your resume. There's multiple different people, right? First, there's a software, or like a tool, an applicant tracking system. How it processes the information on your resume is going to be different from how a human being processes information. What it looks at, what it gives weight to. It's built in a way to like mimic that, but it's not exact. So how you kind of speak to that versus how you speak to a person is going to be different. Then you have someone, probably, like if it's in like a larger company, probably what's happening is there's somebody using the applicant tracking system, and then they're kind of screening that list down even further. So like a lay person, maybe someone in HR, someone who is familiar with the scope of the role, but they don't do that job, right? And then if that stage gets passed, then somebody who actually does that job, potentially who you're going to be reporting to, is going to look at the resume. So it's like multiple steps. And within that decision-making process, depending on how high up, you're interviewing for, there might be the executive board looking at your resume. You might have like other people who are stakeholders looking at your resume. So it depends. But yeah, the person who's just screening your resume, they have a lot to get through, right? They're using the applicant tracking system. They've used the applicant tracking system to, let's say, take 100, a pool of 100 candidates and boil it down to 20. Now their job is to boil this down to like, let's say 5 to 10. So they're like, okay, I'm going to quickly glance through this. If you're not checking off these very kind of, superficial boxes, I'm going to reject your resume. And then that last stack of 5 resumes, or however, it goes to the decision maker for interviews, or you get, a screening call. And then that helps whittle the pile down even further. So what ends up happening is, because this HR person doesn't have like super duper familiarity with like doing the job each and every day, they tend to kind of go with what looks like the safer candidate, right? The more cookie cutter candidate, kind of the person like who looks like they've been doing this job all their life. When in reality, like the people who are the most successful from like a leadership perspective, from innovation, and all of those things that really move the needle, are the people that have something kind of unique and special about their background. Like maybe they started a business and failed, but maybe they learned a lot, and that helps them be like way better than someone who just sat behind a desk all their life. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just there's different ways that you have to speak to these different kinds of people. So if you not like, I guarantee like out of your listeners, like 80% of them are not these kind of cookie cutter candidates who have done one thing all their lives, unless they're just getting their start in the professional space. After a while, you get these hiccups. Maybe you go on maternity or paternity leave. Maybe you were laid off after just working somewhere for 6 months. Maybe you had to change industries. Maybe what you're doing has nothing to do with your degree. There's a lot of these like little questions that can come up. So what you have to do is talk about your work in a way that someone who's looking for the cookie cutter candidate doesn't kind of get their guard up. While at the same time, your resume also has to speak to the person who's looking for that very innovative and creative and a cut above the rest kind of professional too, especially if you're going higher up. Like if you're interviewing for a director level position, like, yeah, you do want to check off all the boxes, but that's the bare minimum. You also want to show that you're cut above the rest. So that's what your resume has to do. It's a tall order, but it's very simple once you've been doing it for 13 years, which I haven't. So I feel like I boiled it down to science, and I can help anybody kind of not raise red flags on their resume. Yeah.
Well, thank you. But that's a little scary when you're thinking about like an application tracker that actually kind of almost pre-screens those resumes based on keywords, right? And so if your resume is not, I guess, really hitting those marks, and it could be just good, it's just that it's not, the system is just automatic and they reject you, and you might not even make it to that pile. And that in itself is something different from the past. The past, you would get a resume. I remember back in the days, you get physical resumes. You read each one of them, and you see like, okay, yes, no. And sometimes we had a couple of people actually we handed down like, what do you think? And then we checked them out, and there's like, all right, these the pile that's gonna go. And I've had those, like we did, open houses, for example. And that's how we did it. People come in, submit the resume, and things like that. So it's changed, like it's just a big difference from like 10 years ago or just about. I mean, it's a whole new world right now. And actually, I've had this discussion with some friends where you submit your resume and you don't even get hits. And the reason is because you basically are just washed out before somebody even took a look at you or got a chance to review your LinkedIn profile, whatever the case may be. Then I love what you said about, then it goes to someone who actually has to determine. I love your honesty about it, is that not everybody is an expert in every role and every experience. So a lot of, and I've seen this, recruiters that may not have the understanding of the industry that they work for. And I've seen that when someone is new to the industry, they got hired because they have some HR background, but they don't know the business itself because they haven't been entrenched into it. They don't even know. And I think sometimes the people, the recruiting managers, have to spend more time to educate them, even have them spend some time in the field with some real folks, to see like what this role really does. Then they'll be able to kind of understand, what this work. Now, of course, that's more difficult, but I think it's culturally, it's acceptable that every company, when they hire someone to do recruiting for them, to train them in the different aspects. And again, every company has multiple positions, but in the sales specific, you have to have certain characteristics. For leadership, you said it best. You have to have some key stuff. And people sometimes they don't look at that. They just look at your last experience. What did you do? Is the title matching? Your title that you had in the last 2 years adds up. Okay, so you're good. You look at the first page, and let's say someone who has been doing, like my case, 30 years, it's 3-page resume. And I can't cut it out any further because you simplify as much, but you still have to have all the pertinent stuff. Then you have like resume structure sometimes can affect, because you have like your experience, your skills sometimes are all the way in the end of a resume. At least the traditional resumes, they look like that. And then you have your statement up front, and you have everything else in between, and you have your education. And some people are looking at different aspects of your resume. And to your point, if you look at my resume, there are things, and there's also things that you don't even put in your resume. I've had businesses that were on the side. They're not career path. They're things that I've started. I don't have them on my resume. So if you're looking for a true leader, you're not going to see that. Now, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you probably can see that. You see, so there are new. I mean, again, now it's becoming more common that when you recruit, you look at somebody's profile on LinkedIn. It's like
Right.
like the first thing you do now.
Right.
Well, I
Right.
don't know if it's the first thing. I mean, you tell us, but but I can tell you, at least from my perspective, we always, like, when you want to know about someone, you just look them up and see like what their posts look like, what their profile looks like, are they involved in things? Could be good or bad, doesn't matter, but it's just something that we do. So it really almost intriguing to know that the world has changed and how you are perceived. And then your future is in the hands of a recruiter or whoever that. So first is the software and then it's you, as the recruiter or the HR person. So how, confident people are today in that selection mode, and if I don't know if you can answer this one or not, but are we missing opportunities with real candidates that may not make it because of the process?
I definitely think so, but I mean, I think that the fears and concerns that employers have, like if we look at both sides of the perspective, I think the way you hire is very it's very empathetic and it's very personal, but a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people will not consider people who are outsiders from, the industry or don't have a specific number of years of experience. And they have these rules and they're kind of unwilling to bend their rules, even if they see someone that potentially could be exceptional. And there's a couple of reasons why. First and foremost, the business risk of taking on a bad hire, it can be immense depending on the role you're recruiting for. It can be very costly. It can be very costly from if they turn out to be a bad person who's potentially doing nefarious things at work, that's very, very expensive. So there's some things that people put in their resumes that make them look like flight risks, that make them look like they potentially aren't professional, and I understand why that happens. I understand why someone would have that fear, right? We want people to not be so driven by fear, but it's the reality of the world. The second thing is a lot of people are exceptional professionals, but they are absolute garbage at selling themselves. You know what I mean? Me included. When I had to put my own resume together recently, I was like, I am the owner of a resume writing business. There are 20 people under me. What is wrong with me right now? But it's so hard to write about yourself because it's considered boasting. And we've been ingrained this from a young age. Don't talk about yourself, shine the light on other people, especially if you're from, if you weren't raised in an individualistic society. It's considered so bad to talk about yourself like this, right? So it's two things. First, people are not selling themselves properly and they're really drawing attention to these things that get people's guard up. And second, the business risk associated with someone who is not a good hire it can be immense. The negative payoff can be really, really high, right? So it is scary. And yes, there are awesome people who are getting dismissed. However, it is my job to help people still kind of navigate those situations, regardless of who they are, what their background is, what's been happening in their life. I mean, I have seen, I think, pretty much everything that's possible. I say this every year and then something new happens, but I think
things change.
I think I have seen pretty much everything that's possible. And I put out a lot of literature on empowering job seekers to navigate their specific situations. Even something as simple as an employment leave, the way you talk about it, I have written 2 blogs on this, how to talk about your employment leave, depending on whether you were taking a break for studies, all the way to if you were suing your employer for something they did. How do you talk about all of these situations if you're interviewing? Because this happens. This is stuff that I've seen where someone's like, I have an employment leave because I was unemployable because I was suing my boss for sexual harassment. Ooh. How do I talk about it? That's not her fault.
Right. But now breaking it down to the
But she's paying for it. Yeah. She's paying for that. Yeah. So this is the situations where I strive to empower, and there's solutions to everything. I promise you. The way you talk about things, even if it seems as big and scary and daunting as, look, I have a legal issue pending right now. There's ways to talk about it in a way that still makes people feel comfortable, that you're not a flight risk, that you're not going to be a bad hire, that you're going to do great work. So there's solutions to everything depending on your story. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So 2 things you mentioned there that it's funny because you said it like it's hard. We're conditioned not to talk about ourselves because it's like it's not the right thing to do. See, in my world, I believe the opposite. You got to talk about yourself. The only one that can sell you is you. There's no one that can sell you better than you. And preparing yourself to be able to do that, you have to be confident and proud. And so, but on the flip side of that, you do have people that are excellent salespeople. They can deliver the pitch, but they can deliver the action. Meaning they can sell it. So when an interviews come in, a lot of people can't prepare themselves well for the interview and make it through the stages. And then when you put them to work, they may not be as good as they promised to be or they presented themselves. So that's one group. And of course, you're right. There are people that are not able to articulate who they are and what they can do for you. And then it becomes very difficult to make that judgment call, when you're hiring. Again, I've literally hired thousands of people over the years, and I've seen all kind of, different approaches and some that really promise you that and not just promise you, drill them. Like I literally do practical, screening questions and do role plays with the people to really, actually, I started with that pen thing back in the days. And now it's really like whatever industry you come in. If you tell me you're coming from software, well, I'm going to be your client. Let's see your approach to actually come in with your software. I don't need you to learn about my industry. Tell me what you have done. And I'm just a new potential client for you in your software work. If you tell me from telecom, well, you know what? What are you selling? I don't know, internet, you're selling phones, whatever. Let's talk about that. So, but you just try to see like in their own skin, in their own expertise. And then you can gauge, are they going to be a good fit or transition to this well? And can you simply shift the product knowledge to them and they'll be able to apply, because the rules, stay the same for sales. So it's really, can they transition to that, and can they discover, like, for example, I'm in the senior market. Well, what are your clients? Who are your clients? Where can you find your clients? If someone cannot figure out where senior market is, then that's a problem, right? You can teach them, but they're supposed to know that. So some of these things can happen. So it's really a very difficult balance, and I don't want to do your job because I know it's tough, because really understanding those balances when you're hiring someone, like, really, is this person doing a good job? You said something, the example you said about the litigation, whatever the case, people sometimes shy away from you just by stating that. They're like, oh, this person is going to cause me problems. If they did before, they're going to be a problem here. So by default, they're already like, this is not happening. So that how do you prevent that? I know there are techniques. Now, if someone doesn't seek your help and they do it on their own, there's a good chance they're not going to be able to do it right. So and that's the challenge that we have. Not everybody knows that there are services, and or has the ability to afford to get services to help them with this. Most people think they can do it themselves.
Right. Now, I do try to make my services as accessible as possible, just by kind of boiling down what we do into like free guides and stuff like that on my website, because I think it is important. I've had someone like come to me and be like, I'm a cancer survivor, and I had to take time off for cancer, and like if I tell people like I had cancer, they don't hire me because they think I'm going to go into remission. That's illegal, but she can't prove that. And these things are really hard to prove, and it's so upsetting and angry. Like you already went through cancer, like how much, and then on top of that, you have this additional really big thing where you can't, you're not paying the bills and all that. So I really try to make things accessible. If you just kind of like look stuff up on my website, I guarantee you'll find something, because I have helped people with all kinds of crazy stories who are experiencing all kinds of issues. And like, at the end of the day, it's just two questions that you have to answer. Is first, like, I'm going to be a good hire. And second is like, I'm not going to cause you any harm, right? As long as you can convey that, like, that's it, that you don't really need to do much more. So it's a simple framework, and there's ways to talk about everything. So please, if you are struggling with something, just do a little bit of Googling. I'm sure you can find, someone else who has a similar story, who was able to sell it in a way that makes sense, and you can copy what they've done. You can ask them for advice, even a great chance to network, right? The other thing I want to kind of follow up on something you said about, some people being really good at selling themselves, and then at the end of the day, they're like not really working that well. In my experience working with sales professionals, sorry guys, I'm gonna have to call you guys out. I've had this experience where like salespeople are like, I'm amazing, I could sell anything. Of course I can sell myself. And they have this like huge, like, yeah, what, like they're just full of energy and everything. But like, I do like a mock interview with them, and I'm like, dude, you are talking so much about things that are making you look unattractive as a candidate. And I have found this specifically in sales professionals only. I mean, yeah, there are some other, random outliers, but I've seen this issue a lot with salespeople where they're like, of course I can sell myself in an interview. I sell every day. I sell 24/7. Like, of course I don't need interview help. But then they're like, I don't know why I'm getting rejected. And I'm like, are you getting interviews? Yeah. Are the interviews turning into offers? No. Okay, that's your bottleneck. Like, figure it out. What are you saying? What are you presenting that's giving the person on the other side of the table pause? Is there something that you're saying that's off-putting? Is the way you're coming across off-putting? Are you saying in any way that, you're not going to be a good hire, or that you're going to cause the company harm? Like, we have to think about that critically. So that's one big thing that I have found with sales professionals. Sorry, guys, I love you, but it's true.
No, but listen, I am a hardcore DNA sales guy, and I can tell you, we all have in the sales world. There's two types of sales, identities. There are the true sales, mentorship people, I would call them that way. And then there's, again, salesmanship here. I mean, it has nothing to do with the gender piece of it. It's more the concept of whether you're really understanding sales dynamics. And it's not about always pitching. It's about the ability to really respond correctly, understanding what the needs are, and be able to articulate that. And you're right, there's the other salespeople, which, again, they do give the perception that we all suck and that all of us are bad. And unfortunately, it's a fact.
You said it. I didn't say it.
No, yeah. Listen, I've said it in many shows, because that's really the problem. Even my trainings, I say it. I mean, we are the second most hated people on the planet, because after lawyers and folks, my lovers, we love you. My lawyers, we love you. The thing is that it's a perception, because of how some elements do create that perception. When you go to some places and the salespeople are just like pitching, and you just, I don't want to pitch. I want someone to help me understand my needs, understand what I want. And that's the difference. You got to be consultative. You have to be, advisor. You can't just be pitching. And because we sell a lot, we talk a lot, sometimes we tend to get that mixed up, and we become overselling. And you're right. That's why, again, to your point, you said it best. Role play is the best way to find out, because then that's when you get into the core. Like I throw in things all the time to people when I say, like, talk to me, like, I'm your client. Here's a scenario. We're at this location. You just made an appointment with me. Give me your best pitch. And the first thing that they will do, and I've seen this, like, I would say 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 interviews, where they just go, oh, so we can do this. We can do this. We can do this. Our products are great. None of that discussion had to do with my needs or what I was about. No one even took the time to ask me. They just go for the kill. Bad move. And that's really what actually most of salespeople do. Now, again, we're not bashing, but these are the things that we need to be aware of.
Yes.
So as you are, if you're in sales, like I said, you have to evolve, and you have to understand that it's not about you. It's about your clients, and you have to find out everything. You got to spend time with the people before asking the right questions. And there's skills to this, open-ended questions, blah, 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 and probing and doing all that good stuff before you can start going into actually a presentation piece. That's the latter part, actually, or even like a smaller portion of it. And when you get to there, you're already like halfway there. And if you're doing this on an interview process, I mean, I do pride myself in one thing, is that if I go to an interview, I go with the concept, this is my job. I have to be better than most of the other candidates, if not all, and maybe wind up to be one of the last, contenders on this particular opportunity. And to be honest with you, so far so good. I mean, my close ratio on that one is pretty good. But the fact is not because I pitch more, like you said. I mean, my resume speaks for itself. It's very concise. But also, it's like you ask me the questions, and again, I've been interviewing for higher roles, and therefore there's you get all these high leadership that actually interviews you. And so these guys, you're not going to bullshit your way around them. They know what they're looking for, and it has to be a clear thing. And sometimes not a good fit for you or for them. And you have to also be mindful of that. Not all opportunities are equal. So it's that thing. So by the way, you didn't offend, anyone. I think you were, around the money. I think for all our audiences, if you're in sales, we have to be mindful of our mistakes and just adjust. There's nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact,
there's like, I did this really stupid thing once, and I was like really beating myself up about it. And I remember my colleague said to me, and I'll never forget this words, stupidity is not an incurable disease. I
I
said
love it.
that. I'm like, if you've done something stupid in the past, it's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world. You can come up and you can fix that. There are solutions to everything.
Well, I think the bigger piece of this is that accountability.
Mm-hmm.
We always like why it's happening, and we look at what they did, like the interviewers or the hiring people, but we never ask the question, what did I do good? What did I do? Did I say it?
Yeah.
And we all have that sense. We know when we walk out of an interview how well we did or how bad we did, because you can't falsify that. You cannot lie to yourself. This was not my best pitch, or this was not, I don't see, the vibe there wasn't there. You can sense some of that, but at the end of the day, you have to look. If it's not happening, to your point, what have I done? There's something wrong with my pitch. There's something wrong why I'm not getting the connection. And so, no, because remember, we got past the tracker, we got past the recruiting. You were in front of the decision makers. You didn't make it. That's the same. That's sales 101. I mean, if you go, we all thrive to actually become in front of someone who is actually going to make a decision if we sell software, whatever product that we have or services. Right. So when you're there, the only difference in an interview that you are the product and a service that so you have to be able to pitch to them, correctly and make sure that they buy, not just buy because you're good, that they have to see it in value and they know that you're going to be a good contributor to their cause, whatever, business they're in. And that's a big challenge. So thank you for actually bringing that. And I hope I helped a little bit, but again, folks, let's not get offended. It is all for us. It's constructive. If you're in sales and you hear this, and let's not think, oh, these guys are talking, bull about us. No, we just want everybody to elevate and just go to the next level where we can be more accountable and more reliable and know when we're actually doing something, how well we're doing it, and prepare for ourselves. I mean, in sales, you have to prepare anyways. So you prepare for it. That's the other thing. You go to an interview, you're not prepared. You have no idea about the company and the role and stuff. And they ask you questions and you don't know. I mean, what do you expect? And I've seen that. Like I've had people like, what do you want to do? I'm not sure. Why? I just applied. All right. So that almost kills the whole thing. Now you got to drill more. And by the way, that's the other thing, like for recruiters, or at least the people, the hiring manager, sometimes I do see that there is a lack of deep diving. And really getting in more and more deep dive with the candidates, because you'll be surprised. Like I'm actually of a firm belief that sometimes I don't like people with the experience, and I'm probably more unique in my approach because I want someone with no experience because I want to train them. See, I don't want baggage or whatever old stuff. I want you new. Like, as long as you have the core, like you're a vanilla, box, just, clean cut, come into me and I'm going to, just design you the way I want it. And, and then you'll be applicable to what we do. So I would give people an opportunity. They could be out of college. I will give them a shot because I think they're hungry. They're motivated, they're ambitious, and they want to do stuff. And yes, let's teach you the tricks and make you the best. And by the way, nothing again. I mean, it's a mix of hiring. You can get someone experienced. But again, with my time spending in recruiting, what I've noticed is that the more people have experience, the more luggage they have, the more pre-notions they have, the more I know it all I have attitude, and therefore the least they will be adaptable. So.
But at the same time, I do feel like out of all the clients that I coach, I do think salespeople are the most coachable, and I think it's because you do have to be really humble to do sales. Like you have to constantly be taking rejections, and like you do have a lot of practice just talking, right? So if I tell people like in sales, like, hey, you're coming across as a jerk, like this is what to do, they'll be like, I'm here for it. Like, let me know. And they'll take notes and they'll implement it the next day. It'll be a completely different person. So if you're like, interviews are your biggest bottleneck, here's what I would tell you. Just like you sell your products in that consultative way, you want to do the same thing. So like, the first part of any sales cycle is doing the research. So look at the job description, look at the company, look up the person on LinkedIn. And when you're looking at the job description, don't just look at what it says, read between the lines as well. If they're using language like, bootstrap or like creating a sales roadmap from scratch, or, this kind of language indicates that they're a small setup. They need someone to wear multiple hats. They need someone who can work within a small budget and that sort of thing. If they're using language like eliminating silos between sales and marketing, or if they're like unify our brand collateral, that's telling you that they want you to show that you can handle working at a very big company. You can be responsible for a larger budget, so you have to read between the lines to understand what their cultural needs are. And accordingly, when you're giving your interview, you can pick examples for your stories that relate more closely to that culture. So you don't want to go into like, if they're having that kind of small business kind of language in their job description, you don't want to go in and be like, yeah, I was responsible for like a team of 30 and, our budget was like $6 million. They're going to be like, first of all, this person is too expensive. Like, we're not going to be able to pay their salary, and they're going to be too expensive in terms of like, I do not think they're going to be capable of success with the amount of money that we can expend to this department. Right. And, the flip side of it is you can't go in there and be like, yeah, I love starting things from scratch. I can build up your sales team, blah, blah, blah. And at a bigger company that has that kind of language, because they're going to be like, this person is like a lone wolf kind of person. They cannot work well with other people, So you have to read between the lines when you're doing your research as well. It's not just about knowing what their product is. It is also about understanding their culture and what language would make them feel like, ooh, I would get along really well with this person. And you know how to do that. Like, you're in sales. You do this every single day. This is not a new or a difficult thing for you. You just have to take what you do for work and really apply it in this situation. It's so easy for someone in sales, really, because you guys do this every single day, right?
Well, yeah. Well, again, Fatemah, we're talking about sales specifically, but this can apply to other people that may not be in the sales world. This can apply to other
people, for sure.
It's just a matter of understanding, to your point, reading between the lines and really understanding, do research, go to websites, see what this company, how long they've been in practice, and, what's their, footprint is, and so on and so forth, to understand the dynamics. Even look at their employer base. I mean, is it to your point, small, large company, the culture that you have. So all these things can make a difference. And sometimes it's very difficult. Listen, sometimes people have to make a decision because it's bread and butter. They need their livelihood, and
for sure
they got to get into a company because they need to make money. And so that also leads me to the next question, which is, some people are overqualified on resumes, and that's the other thing. The higher you go, in the actual levels, the more difficult or the least roles are available in that industry that you're in. So sometimes you're in a transition, you need to get a role, and you find a role that is a little less than where you were. What is your take on that in terms of someone applying? I mean, the standard consensus is that that will undermine your career, your resume. A lot of people think that way. So what is your advice to people if they say they are director level, but now there's a senior manager level, there's VP, and there's a director level? I mean, there's ego that plays, there's experience that plays, there is image that plays. So what do you tell people about that, and what advice would you give them in terms of the path that they have to select? Do they have to be patient and just seek the same level, accept a little less? Because here's the thing: if I go to you as your interviewer or someone that's reviewing my resume, and I'm applying for a director and not being a VP for the last 10 years, would you hire me? You see,
because it also depends on the size of your company, right? Like, a VP at a small business could have been like kind of like what a director would be for like a large business. So I always tell people, like, if you have some kind of thing where like you have to take a job, there's some financial issue or something like that, like, it's not the end of the world. And like I've been saying, like, there is a way to tell your story that will still make sense. Like, you shouldn't stress out so much about this to the point that you're like, no, this is do or die. Like, I have to get another VP job. It's going to look bad. It's, this is going to be a giant step down for me. No, like, there are countless people who do this. There are people who literally look for this. Like, they're like, you know what? I'm 60 plus and I just want the health insurance now. Me and my spouse need health insurance. I'm trying to get a job where I'm not like, having this giant responsibility on my shoulders anymore because I'm a little burnt out. And that's the story they want to tell without making themselves sound like old and tired and, technologically like incompetent. And these are the unfortunate biases that you have when you're a 60 plus job seeker. But like I've been saying, there's a way to communicate everything that still makes sense to the person on the other side of the table. So, there are ways to, let's say you are a VP and you're considering accepting a director level position. And then you're like, well, the next one I want is going to have to be like a VP, and so how do I talk about my director level experience? First, what are some of the vice presidential duties that you potentially did as a director? Like the line between director and VP is quite blurry. So there might have been some things. There might have been like departments that you were building up from scratch, or there might have been like really large budgets you were leading. Maybe your company doesn't have a VP. The director reports directly to the chief sales officer or something like that, right? So you can just say like reported directly to the chief sales officer, did vice presidential duties. You can use this language on your resume. So it's really not the end of the world. And if you are really feeling crippled and hopeless about this kind of situation, just talk to me. Like I'll help you figure it out. I've seen people make this transition over and over again because it's the reality of the world we live in, right? Like people move, you have to move with your spouse, so you're taking a different job, or your industry took a hit. You know, these things happen. So this is very normal and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, I want to thank you, and I appreciate it. And and I'll just want to add a couple of things to that. So I personally did that a couple of times in my life for various reasons. I mean, I moved out of the state, the city, and then I came back and switched from one type to another of the sales, and I had to scale back because I didn't have the concurrent or like the similar responsibilities in that particular aspect of the business. So I had to step back to actually build the trust, and then move back up again from the other side. So they always do it. Again, you got to put your ego aside, and that's the other thing. And as long as the pay scale is, and sometimes the pay scale may be a little less, so you have no choice. You got to take what you have to take to make it. So the adjustments, to your point, can be done, and we have to look at what's best. Sometimes, for example, we talked about earlier between San Francisco and Florida, or like LA to Florida. They're different, dynamics. You might be in the same industry, but now here, because you don't have local experience, they're not going to give you that higher, ranking officer, because you got to build your name there. So you have to understand what where you're in for, and just be malleable to the degree, and then build yourself. I mean, if you're good at what you do, it will take a few months to actually prove that you're good, and eventually, you'll get back to that, and you will grow up again. So again, you have to be optimistic about it. You have to be strategic about it. Now, you mentioned something about the 60 plus, and that, and one key word you said is that, technologically challenged, so I think you referred something about technology. What do you say to people? Because I think that is times have been changing very quickly in terms of technology, and not everybody is catching up with the tech. What advice do you have to people that, whether they're in the same industry or they're willing to change or they want to scale back, they need to have some current skills to help them, go. So what's the advice that you would give people?
So obviously this is like a huge bias that is completely untrue in many situations. Like if we look at the chief information officer for any of like the larger companies, they are going to be 60 plus, right? They come with a wealth of experience. They've been leading a lot of these technology changes that we as non-technical people have been taking advantage of. So because I said that you seem, tired and technologically incompetent and all of that, that's not the reality of the situation. However, when you're just a piece of paper, you're not a face, it's very easy to have these biases. Oh my God, this person graduated in 1979. I wasn't even born. Like, some of these millennials that are hiring that are like in their early 30s, they're going to be like, all right.
I'm feeling that already. I know that feeling.
we have some Gen Z people in HR, and that's so there are a few solutions to this. It depends on the specific bias that you think you might be running into. If you think that people think you're old and tired and all of that, first and foremost, you don't want to list your date of graduation, right? Because that's irrelevant. And you don't want to go back. Like if it makes sense to remove some of your older experiences, like if you were like a storeroom clerk back in the 80s, like maybe that has nothing to do with what you're doing now. Just remove it. Maybe you got your start in like a totally different field, just remove it and start your experiences. And let's see, it's 2023 now. So maybe 2005. So it shows that you have about 18 years of experience, which is fine. It's a decent amount. So that's one thing that you can do. And the second thing that you can do, and this doesn't apply if you're going for like a CEO role, because you definitely want to show that you have a long history and you've seen some stuff. You know what I mean? you want to show that you have the gravitas to do that. Second thing you want to do is, a lot of the people, especially like I live in Southern California, and like half the times someone is 60 plus, I'm like, you're lying. Like, you are not 60 plus, because people are so fit these days. They take such exceptional care of themselves. They might be in their 70s and 80s, but they're so immensely active. If you do anything to stay active, maybe you do Pilates, or maybe you hike, or you mountain bike, or you're a triathlete, which are things I've seen in the senior community. Add that at the bio section of your resume. At the end of the resume, you think, oh, no one's going to be reading this far, but there's something, and I forgot the exact word for this, but there's a psychological phenomenon. It's really something to parentheses. You tend to remember the first thing you see and the last thing you see. So people are going to be looking near your education anyway to see what your educational background is. Just have something there, like one line that has your bio, avid hiker or triathlete or whatever. Show that you stay fit, and this helps make your resume look a lot more youthful. And of course, for technology, like, this is a bias that I'm starting to see as more and more incorrect as time passes. Ageism is illegal, but it's still the number one form of discrimination in the United States. So a way to overcome this bias and show that, listen, man, I was around when the internet was invented. I know things that you don't know. And to tell those little kids, you can talk about things like if you've done any implementations, or if you helped mentor people on, like, the CRM you are using, let's say. Go to, like, the language you can use is something like go to source for all CRM inquiries post-implementation. Or maybe you took some classes on, like, data analytics for marketing professionals, and you're using that to make, like, data-informed decisions for your sales organization. You can talk about that and make sure that that's kind of towards the higher up portion of your resume, maybe by moving your education higher, or by putting a continuing education section at the very top, or by adding that to your summary, like having some selected achievements where you're talking about some of your technology achievements there. So those are some of the things that you can do to alleviate some of these biases. And if you are in that situation, like, I know it's really tough. Like, you have so much on your plate already. You're going through so much, and to be confronted with such a bias from these young whippersnappers who don't know what they're talking about. It's very frustrating, but I've helped hundreds of people make that transition, and it's doable. It's not something that you should be giving up hope on.
Well, so I'm gonna give you a joke. So I still have an AOL email.
Oh my God!
But I have, like, a Gmail.
I'm trying very hard not to judge.
No. I have everybody else. I have all the others. But it's funny because people, oh, you still have an AOL? Well, I mean, I've had an AOL. I have everything else, and I got, like, I have 12 emails. But really, it's funny because that's like my first. I mean, this was like when dial-up was still in existence. Internet was just a figment of imagination, right? So, but it still exists, and you still have it, and I have some accounts there and things like that. So, but obviously, I don't have that on my resume. I have a Gmail, which is more concurrent. But the fact is, like, that's just something that, now that you mention it, people may not realize that, how people are just going, oh my God, and like, again, I've been in the industry 30 years. Your education is 30 years old, and someone can say, like, well, this happened to me at a job. They did the background, like, well, we need your, college transcripts. Dude, 30 years ago, I don't even know what those things are. You know what I mean? You hire me for my college transcripts, or you hire me for my experience and stuff. So, but these are the things that sometimes are difficult to, and you're right, it's something you have to articulate, as you interview, but you got to make it to the stage of selection. That's the problem. Right. So Fatemah, one thing that I wanted to ask addition is, what are some of the trends that you see in today in terms of, like, movement or migrations? I mean, I know you mentioned real estate to software. Is that really the trend right now, or are there other trends that are going right now that you see? Because we talk about that the great resign, I think.
Resignation. Yeah.
That's happening.
Right.
I mean, are you seeing more people kind of, maybe, because this is something that I hear all the time in some of the talk shows, people are more doing their own businesses, they're doing online, they're trying to be remote. What trends are you seeing specifically right now in terms of this, and what advice would you give people as they make those decisions?
Well, you have to understand, like, my experience comes with a lot of bias, because only specific people will reach out to me, right? So, like, making a movement into, let's say, going into, car sales, that's not maybe something that you need professional help with, because the hiring criteria for someone who's selling cars is not as aggressive as it would be for hiring, like, a medical device salesperson, right? So what I'm saying definitely has a lot of bias, but I am seeing a lot of people try to transition into cybersecurity, software sales, Medical device was really huge, in the pandemic period. Pharmaceuticals was really huge in the pandemic period. It's still pretty big now, but I did do some research on this, and I have seen that in the beginning of 2023, there was a survey that I saw of the sales industry as a whole, and pays were a lot lower for account executives, like individual contributor roles, and in the sales. It was like a 2% lower pay range than 2022 and in the beginning of 2023, which is huge considering the inflation, right?
Oh yes.
So there is a little bit of like trouble that I'm seeing with some individual contributor roles, depending on the industry you're in. I have never seen that, to be quite honest, in my history here, to see like a 2% like reduction in initial offers. So that was a little bit interesting. But yeah, the transitions that I'm seeing and the industries that do pay higher tend to be like software, medical device, pharmaceuticals, because these are industries where you need to also have sometimes the educational background. Like for some people, to do medical device sales, like they'll only take people who graduated with a related degree. Even if you have like 20, 30 years of experience, they'll still not consider you if you don't have that degree. So because there's so many like compliance issues and all of that, they really are very rigorous about who they hire. But that's not to say that transition can't be done. I have helped a lot of people with that transition in the past. It's just specific employers have specific requirements. So these industries tend to pay higher. Even at the executive level, the executives in these industries tend to make a lot more. The executives in these industries tend to have master's degrees in their relative fields. Like for software, you might have like a master of software engineering. For pharmaceuticals, you might have like a master's in bioengineering or pharmaceuticals or whatever. And this can make your salary offering much higher once you're going director level and higher.
So Fatemah, is there a correlation to like years of experience versus years of education? For example, 1 year, let's say a bachelor's degree is equal 10 years of experience. Does that even work in terms of selection criteria?
I feel like it used to back in the day. I feel like that's how people used to see your education, as it counts for real world experience. But these days, it's a bias that unfortunately a lot of younger people are running into, where they've gone to school, they're like tens of thousands in debt, and people are like, you don't have experience. So if you are a young professional and you are having a very hard time, I just finished updating this blog that I wrote. Is titled something like how to get a job if you don't have any internship experience. You do have to show that in addition to your degree, you did something else. Even if you parked cars for your school's valet, that's something. And how you talk about it, like maybe you handled large amounts of cash and all of that. Like there's transferable skills that you can pull. So you have to do something else while you're in school. You can't just be partying and going to class, unfortunately. And if you're a senior and you're like, oh no, expletives, I haven't done anything. You should check out my blog. There are ways that you can still add something tangible to your resume to show that, hey, I'm not just an egghead who got A's. Like I have real world experience. I know how to talk to people with conflicting interests. I know how to like problem solve. I have real world skills. So if this is a bias against underprivileged people, quite frankly, underprivileged students, because when you're from an underprivileged background, you're going to be working while you're going to school. You're going to be trying to pay bills. Like maybe you're like a working mom that you might have like a crazy work ethic, but your resume is going to look less good than, somebody who from a very privileged background who has all of their education paid for, has the flexibility and time to sign up for internships, has connections, and their, parents can get them internships with prestigious companies and stuff like that. So you really have to sell yourself in a way that makes sense, in a way that still looks competitive against the more privileged student. And it's very unfortunate that that's happening. But it's the reality. And like unpaid internships, like what is that? Like you cannot do that if you're from an underprivileged background and you have bills to pay, right? You have already all these stresses at home, I'm sure. So if that's something that you're experiencing, you have to talk about the work that you have done in a way that makes sense. You have to also talk about some of your classwork and your assignments and your projects in a way that helps showcase your real world skills. And whenever you have the opportunity even if you're working like something totally unrelated, maybe you're a server at a restaurant, or maybe you are, like I said, parking cars, or you're a cashier, try to apply some of what you're learning in school to your workplace. Have conversations with your boss about some of the things that you're studying, maybe some of the things that you can roll out at work. Maybe you're an accounting student and, you're working at a restaurant as a server. Maybe you can talk to your boss about, hey, can I look into your QuickBooks once in a while? And can I just shadow you while you're doing the accounting every night? Can I just learn from you? And it's going to take a little extra time. Like it might take 15 minutes extra, which is something a little bit difficult to afford when you have so many responsibilities. But you can add that to your resume. You can say something like, helped the boss with QuickBooks. This is a very critical like accounting skill that you can showcase. So try to be creative and how you can draw connections between the job that you eventually want to do and some of the work that you're doing now to put yourself through school. And if this is something that you're having a hard time with, like reach out to me. Maybe there's something we can brainstorm together. Or at least shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help kind of guide you through some of what you're going through. And I'm really sorry that's happening because like, I get it. I also put myself through school. I was also working full time. I didn't have all those connections either. And like my heart goes out to you. It's not fun. And you do tend to get a little bit angry at, how difficult things are, because I think that's like college is when that classism really starts to show, right? Because when you're in high school, you're kind of like, okay, everyone lives in the same like crappy neighborhood. We all have the same kind of crappy houses. So you have that camaraderie. We get to college and you see people that are driving like $100,000 cars as freshmen. And you're just like, I am taking the bus for 4 hours every day, bro. Like what is happening? It can make you really angry, but just try to stay positive. Try to focus on the fact that there is an end in sight, that you are going to school in order to better your lives, and you are going to get $100,000 car soon too.
Well, listen, that's the only way to think about it. And you're right. Yep. You got to make it work. It is what it is. I mean, everybody's circumstance can be different and we have to adjust and adapt. And as long as you don't lose sight, of your end game, and that's all. So, but on the flip side to that, if someone, for example, has, let's say, an associate degree, but has enough experience, and would a recruiter even consider them as a good fit for a role that required, let's say, a bachelor's degree? Just a question that comes to mind, which is almost the reverse psychology on that one.
No, I think definitely employers are becoming more flexible with your educational requirements, and it also does depend on the industry. Like real estate might not have as high of a threshold for education. Not threshold, sorry, barrier of entry for education as, say, medical device, sales. So it does depend. And if you are trying to break into sales, it's, having a degree is not a hard rule. You can go into sales in different fields and build up your experience that way. With that being said, if you are trying to transition into like more scientific sales, like medical device, pharmaceuticals, software, like you do have to show somewhere on your resume that you have the requisite skills. So you can build that up in a multitude of ways, depending on the industry you're
certifications,
shadowing. Do what you can, and talk about it in a way that makes sense.
Excellent. So one thing, does language play, a good role in terms of selection, mode? Meaning, if you speak a different language, or you I guess master a different other language, does that give you an advantage, or is that a disadvantage?
I have seen, and this is really sad, but I have seen that it is a disadvantage in most situations. Like if you put the languages that you are, fluent in, let's say, if I put fluent in Hindi, Urdu, blah, 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 like people are going to be like, oh, and they're not going to take me as seriously as if I put nothing. And this is weird to me. And I'm like, why? But I think it's like a racism thing that's happening. Unless you're going into, I don't know, medicine and you speak Spanish, like obviously that's a big plus, because you can then serve underserved communities that speak Spanish, or, whatever the case may be. So the only place that I've seen that it being a big strength is medicine and healthcare. But otherwise, I have seen it's not really seen as a plus. Sorry, I take that back. If you are applying for jobs in organizations that are trying to establish their markets in other countries, then it might be a big plus. Like I have a friend who he grew up here and everything, but he's fluent in Japanese. So he got like a really high paying sales executive role in Japan. And then a Singaporean company was trying to penetrate the Japanese market, and in Singapore they speak English. So now he's not just like a Japanese salesperson, but he's someone with an American background who's fluent in both English and Japanese, and he has that senior sales management experience. So in that case, it was a big plus. I'm just talking about within the United States. I'm from California, and you would think, oh yeah, California is so liberal and like, yeah, like love to everybody who looks all kinds of ways. But I have found that unfortunately that's not the case. So I don't usually put that, and I wouldn't put things like, US citizen or, something like that. And if your schooling was done abroad, I wouldn't put the name of the city and stuff like that, because these things do tend to make people feel xenophobic, unfortunately.
So you would remove those from the resume and then ultimately talk about them when you're past the stage of I guess.
Yeah, like let's say if you went to school in India and you graduated in India, I would just put the name of the university. I wouldn't like visually emphasize this was in India. You know what I mean? And if possible, if it's like one of those really long Indian university names, Indians, y'all know who you are with your long university.
Everywhere. I think it's international. Yeah. Well, yeah. Listen, I have a similar. My degree is from overseas, and so that's always been a challenge. But luckily in my industry, languages were a skill that was acquired or needed, and so that was not hard. But it's really interesting to hear that it's actually a deterrent versus an actual advantage. I never thought about it. It
depends on your industry. Like if you're going into, let's say, software development, to put that you're also fluent in Spanish, that's not a strength, right?
Yeah, they don't care.
It's cool, it's sexy, but it's not going to help you do the job. So if it's going to help you do the job, you can put it. If it's not, then I would actually refrain from using it. Yeah.
All right. So thank you. So one last question, and then we're just over the hour. In the application process these days, there are a lot of questions about, I'm not disabled, or am I disabled? I'm not a veteran. What's that about? I mean, for people, because I mean, it is kind of scary when you're like, you have to respond to this. I don't feel like responding, but you almost have, you have the option to say, I do not want to disclose or whatever. Right. But what is that? I mean, because that's like, is that like a filter to decide who is what? No.
Usually that data is going to two different places. Like your resume data is going to one place, and then that diversity, equity, and inclusion data is going to another place. So what the company is trying to do is assess how many applicants they're getting, how many hires they're making that are of these protected categories, and it'll help them with things like, market their employer brand. It'll help them sometimes with tax benefits and stuff, like hiring veterans. You can sometimes get tax benefits from. So the person that's looking at your resume is not getting that data as well. Like in the end of the whole process, they might have like in their applicant tracking system, they might say, okay, this person checked off that they were disabled and they were hired. So it allows the company to, okay, I have this data point that we hired someone who says that they have a disability, and we can use this data in such and such way, either to market their brand or to get some benefits or something like that. So I would recommend that you not worry about that too much. It's not gonna bite you in the butt.
No, thank you. And again, I thought just it would be relevant for today's question. I mean, just to give people a little comfort zone to what that means, because again, it's just something that can be like, oh my God, because like you always ask the question if you're applying.
Right.
So if you're applying now, you know what that is, and to your point, it makes sense that that data is collected to assist that company for whatever reason. If they work at the government, it gives them kudos and gives them, I guess, brownie points, right? All right. So just one last, question. How can people reach out to you? And also, do you offer services all over via some sort of a Zoom or remote, or does it have to be local?
No. I offer services all over the United States, and we work around people's hours. So we can start really early in the morning, depending on your time zone, or later in the evening, because the clients we work with tend to work crazy hours too. So we work around their schedules. But yeah, if you'd like to work with us, you can go to CareerTuners.com and check out what we do. And if you'd like to grab what I like to call my salary doubling resume cheat sheet, you can check that out at CareerTuners.com as well. So sign up and you'll get lots of goodies too.
All right. Well, this is only specific to the US. And do you have any clients, or are you open to people maybe that need some assistance from all over the world? Because you know, you mentioned Singapore and Japan, and so there's a mass exodus of people today from the US to
Right.
other countries. So are you
Right.
assisting in those transitions as well?
Yeah, we tend to, like, if someone reaches out to us and asks, we do. But typically, we tend to work with people who are within the United States and are looking to stay within the United States. We do get the random, person once in a while from the Middle East or from from Singapore and all of that. Sometimes it does take a little bit of research for us to prepare their work because, like how you sell yourself in the United States is going to be totally different from how you sell yourself in, say, like Japan, right? So I would say the people we're most comfortable working with are Americans. However, if you do have a specific need, then we'd be happy to help you as well.
All right. So that's it. We're done. Just if you don't mind, we're closing our show. What would be a fair advice to leave our audiences with today?
Just like I've been saying, just stay positive because there is a solution to everything. Like, do not feel there's something embarrassing about your profile. Do not hesitate to communicate something to a coach or to a mentor, because you need help marketing it and, interviews and stuff like that. So if you're struggling, if you're like, man, this is something that I just am not able to surpass, reach out to somebody who can help you, that can listen to you, that can help you navigate those situations. Yeah.
Fatemah, it was great having you. I mean, it was delightful.
Thank
I learned a lot. Definitely, we shared a lot of insights for people, and this is important. I mean, career paths are a big deal for everyone. I mean, that's livelihood, and doing it right from the source can help land the right job, the right opportunity, the right career path, and success. So thank you so much. Keep doing the great work you do. We are connected. Definitely have the link of your site into the description of the show so people can actually reach out to you. And that's about it. And
thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, folks, thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was a pleasure being here.
No, pleasure is mine. Pleasure is mine. Folks, again, we're coming to the end of the show. So thank you for being with us, listening, watching in, and we'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic, new guest. Bye for now.